You're listening to The Deep Dive, where AI voices break down big ideas. Every week, Nova and Echo guide you through the tools, trends, and thinking behind the AI revolution. No hype, no fluff, just smart conversations sparked by AI.
Welcome to The Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving into, well, a whole stack of sources, focusing on this really fascinating and kind of emerging skill, prompt engineering.
Mm-hmm. It's everywhere now, isn't it?
It really is. We've pulled together articles, some research, looking at how people actually interact with AI, specifically text-to-image models for making art, and also large language models, LLMs, for things like generating ideas, solving problems.
Yeah, covering both the creative and the more, let's say, analytical applications.
Exactly. And our mission, really, with this deep dive is to unpack what these sources tell us about prompt engineering. You know, is it some kind of innate artistic talent, or is it something you actually need to learn?
And maybe how humans can best work with AI, to get those really creative results.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this material. Where should we start?
Well, it makes sense to start with the visual side, maybe? The text-to-image AI art.
Good idea. So the sources seem to suggest prompt engineering here is a, quote, novel creative skill.
Mm-hmm.
We look at one study that dug into whether people could actually recognize good prompts if they could write them, and then crucially, if they could improve them.
Yeah, and what's really interesting from that study, they found that participants could generally tell the difference between, a good prompt and a bad one, or at least a good image resulting from a prompt versus a not so good one.
Okay, so they have some visual sense or prompt sense.
Right. And they were also pretty capable of writing descriptive prompts, describing a scene.
And this seems like the important bit. Well, they could describe things clearly like beautiful landscape with majestic mountains, or a white fluffy puppy playing in the grass, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They often lack the specific style vocabulary, the kind of words you really need for effective prompting with these AI art models.
Exactly. They didn't seem to instinctively know or use the keywords or maybe prompt modifiers that the AI models are often trained on, the ones that give you specific artistic effects or visual styles.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It sort of suggests that prompt engineering isn't necessarily intuitive, right? Your everyday language, even if you're really good at describing things.
Yeah.
It might not line up perfectly with how an AI model interprets certain keywords, especially those terms that become common in AI art communities, or maybe words the model just weights really heavily because of its training data.
Right. It points towards it being a skill you have to acquire, through practice, through learning, rather than something you just know how to do perfectly right off the bat.
So the study actually designed tasks around this. They had people rating images and prompts.
Yeah, the hypothesis was basically if you understand prompt engineering, you should be able to look at a prompt and predict how good the resulting image will be.
And did that hold up?
It did. They confirmed that prompts with rich description plus those specific prompt modifiers tend to give you higher quality images. You can really see it in the examples they provided in the study.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, comparing the images rated high versus low on aesthetic appeal, the difference that specific language makes is, well, it's pretty stark sometimes.
Wow. They even had people try to imagine images just from reading the prompts, didn't they? To see if the mental picture matched what a good prompt would actually get from the AI.
Mm-hmm. And when they asked participants to actually write prompts for images, again, they were very descriptive, like you said, about the content.
But the missing piece was?
Those style modifiers. Most people didn't use terms that are common in AI art circles. I think the study mentioned only one participant purposefully used a technical term like Unreal Engine.
Just one. Wow.
Yeah. And very few used even generic style words like artwork.
So even when they were told, create an artwork, they mostly just described the scene and kind of left the style up to chance, or whatever the AI defaulted to.
Pretty much. It seems the focus was purely on the subject matter and the general scene description.
Okay, what about improving prompts? Did they look at that too?
They did. They tracked participants trying to improve their prompts after seeing the first AI output. They used something called Levenstein distance to measure the changes.
Levenstein distance.
Yeah.
right, that measures how many edits you make to a piece of text.
Exactly. It counts the minimum number of single-character edits, insertions, deletions, substitutions to change one text string into another. So it basically quantifies how much they messed with their original prompt.
Got it. So a higher distance means more significant changes. And what did they find? Did people change them a lot?
Well, they found participants tended to add more words than they removed. They piled on nouns and adjectives, like they were trying to be even more descriptive.
Trying to clarify the picture with more detail.
Right. But the results were pretty mixed. Despite making those changes, only a minority actually managed to significantly improve the quality of their revised images. Yeah, for most, the images stayed about the same quality, even after they put in the effort to edit the prompt.
Huh. That's fascinating. So it tells us that just adding more words isn't the secret sauce.
It seems not. It's about adding the right kind of words, the specific language, the style terms, the modifiers that the AI models understand and respond to.
So for AI art, prompt engineering really does look like a skill, something that requires learning specific techniques, specific vocabulary, not just being generally descriptive.
That seems to be the strong takeaway from that study, yeah. You need to learn the AI's dialect, almost.
Which leads us nicely into the next area, how prompt engineering is being looked at in education, specifically art education. There was another study focused there, right? Using tools like DALL-E 2.
Yes, exactly. This one looked at art students using these generative AI tools. It focused specifically on their prompt engineering practices and, importantly, their iterative processes, how they refine things over time.
So they were actually taught prompting techniques.
They were. They learned techniques, they crafted multiple prompts, saw the results, and then refined them.
And how did that go? Did the process help?
The study found it really did help the students explore ideas. It encouraged what they called a more detail-oriented approach to their work.
How so?
Well, the act of seeing what the AI produced and then having to think about how to change their language to get a different result, it made them think more critically about the visual elements, about how their words were translating into images.
Okay, that makes sense. And when they looked at how the students changed their prompts during these iterations, was it similar to the first study?
It was, actually. The most common change, again, was just adding more description. About 26.5% of the changes were simply adding more descriptive words. They also changed subjects or adjectives sometimes.
But what about those crucial style terms? Did the art students use specific artists' styles?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But no. Echoing the previous study, changing prompts to incorporate specific artist styles was very uncommon, less than 3% of changes.
Wow. Even art students weren't intuitively reaching for, like, in the style of Van Gogh or whatever.
Apparently not often, no. It's another strong signal that this AI-style language is something you probably have to learn explicitly. It's not just general art knowledge.
Interesting. Did the students bring up other issues? Ethical concerns, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. That was a key part of the discussion in the educational context. Things like the impact on the job market for artists, copyright issues, those came up.
Which is really important to address, especially when teaching this stuff.
Definitely. But on the other hand, they also saw AI as a really valuable tool, particularly for brainstorming and generating initial ideas.
How are they using it?
Well, one interesting finding was students using the AI images almost like a springboard. They'd generate something with AI, maybe an interesting concept or composition, and then they'd take that idea and recreate it or refine it themselves using Photoshop. So the AI provided the initial spark, and then human skill took over for the execution and refinement.
That's a cool workflow.
Yeah.
Using AI as an ideation partner.
Exactly. And some of the more advanced students used it in even more complex collaborative ways. Like, they created original designs. I think the example was alien plants.
Okay.
Then they had their peers describe those designs in text, reinterpret them verbally, and then they fed those peer descriptions into the AI to generate new images based on the interpretations.
Whoa, that's multi-layered. Using AI as part of a human-to-human collaborative process mediated by text and image generation.
Right. It shows AI being integrated into this quite sophisticated, human-led, creative workflow.
So what does this tell us about education then? It sounds like teaching prompt engineering, emphasizing that iterative process, can definitely enhance creativity. It helps students explore ideas differently.
For sure. It opens up new avenues,
Yeah.
but it also means educators really need to tackle those ethical questions head on.
And potentially teach that specific AI interaction vocabulary and those techniques we keep talking about. Bridging the gap between just describing things and actually speaking the AI's language for style and control.
Exactly. It's not just about being creative in general. It's about learning the specific language of the tool to unlock its creative potential.
Okay, so we've looked at art. Let's shift gears a bit. How does prompt engineering work for broader creative tasks? Things like generating business ideas or maybe solving problems.
Right. Moving beyond the visual, the sources we looked at, including some from, I think, Harvard Business School and AWS, they highlight how LLMs can be really powerful tools for ideation, divergent thinking.
How do they frame that?
Well, what's compelling is how they sort of map LLM capabilities onto two key pathways of human creativity: persistence and flexibility.
Okay, persistence and flexibility. What's persistence in this context?
Persistence is about generating a lot of ideas, but within a fairly narrow area, really digging deep into one theme.
And you can boost that with LLMs.
Yeah, using techniques like few-shot prompting, where you give the AI a few examples of the kind of ideas you want.
Ah, like showing it the pattern.
Exactly. Or retrieval augmented generation, which lets the AI pull in external specific information, or even fine-tuning the model on a particular data set relevant to your narrow topic.
Okay, so you can really focus the AI's output.
It can, but the sources also add a note of caution here. While this is great for generating volume in a specific area, you might hit a ceiling in terms of how truly original the ideas are if you only use this focused, persistent approach.
Right, so volume doesn't automatically mean breakthrough novelty. What about the other path, flexibility?
Flexibility is the opposite, really. It's about generating diverse ideas, spanning different categories or concepts, breaking out of the narrow focus.
And how do you encourage that with an LLM? Seems harder.
Well, you can do it by varying your prompts significantly, asking for different kinds of ideas. You can also use techniques like chain of thought prompting.
Where you ask the AI to explain its reasoning.
Yeah, asking it to break down its thinking step by step can sometimes lead it down more diverse paths. And you can also tweak the model's temperature parameter.
Temperature. Right, I've heard of that. It controls randomness.
Kind of. Think of it like a dial for creativity versus coherence. A higher temperature makes the output more diverse, more random, sometimes more unpredictable, potentially more flexible. A lower temperature makes it more focused, more predictable, sticking closer to the most probable outputs.
So you can literally dial up or down
Yeah.
the AI's creative weirdness or exploration. That's interesting.
It gives you some control over that trade-off.
The sources also mentioned different sort of ideation roles for LLMs, where humans are still really central, right?
Yes, that was a key point. The AI isn't always the one having the idea. Sometimes it plays a supporting role.
Like what?
Well, one role they propose is the LLM as the designer. In this case, it helps you select diverse examples for, say, an experiment or analysis. It can ensure your examples vary along specific dimensions you care about, making your process maybe more rigorous or reproducible.
So the AI helps structure the human's creative exploration or research. That's a different way of thinking about it.
It is. Another role is the LLM as the writer. Here, the AI isn't necessarily generating the core concept itself, but it's helping you improve how your ideas are expressed,
How so?
making them more articulate, maybe more persuasive, or even just simpler and clearer. The sources point out that LLMs can be great at simplifying complex text, like academic jargon. And sometimes just expressing an idea in simpler, more concrete language can actually boost how creative it seems to others, because it's easier to grasp and build on.
That's a really interesting point about procession. The clarity of the expression affects the perceived creativity of the idea itself. LLMs could be powerful communication aids then.
Definitely. And then there's a third role they mention, which kind of flips the script. The human is the key ideator, but the LLM acts as the interviewer.
The AI interviews the
Yeah.
human.
You prompt the AI to ask you the human thought-provoking questions designed to spark your creativity, challenge your assumptions, or maybe push you to combine concepts you hadn't thought of connecting.
Wow, so instead of you prompting the AI for ideas, the AI prompts you. That sounds like a potentially really powerful brainstorming partner.
It really leverages the AI's ability to access and connect vast amounts of information, but uses that power to stimulate the human mind through targeted questions.
That's fascinating. Now, the sources also included some important cautions, didn't they, about how we should view these LLMs?
Yes, absolutely a critical point. We need to be really careful not to anthropomorphize them too much, not to treat them like actual people or perfect simulations of human thought.
Because they're not.
They're not. They're generating text based on patterns they learned from massive amounts of data. And that data can contain biases, which the LLM can then reflect or even amplify. Things like overrepresenting certain cultural viewpoints, like Western liberal perspectives, were mentioned as a potential issue.
Right. It's a pattern matching machine, fundamentally. You have to be aware of its limitations, its potential blind spots, its inherent biases from the data it trained on.
Precisely. You need that critical lens. Now, there was another study, this one from AWS, I believe, that did a direct comparison. It compared traditional human crowd ideation against human AI collaboration for generating sustainable business ideas.
Yeah. Okay. Head-to-head comparison. How did they set up the human AI collaboration?
They used two different approaches with GPT-4. One was called independent search. Here, the human gives one prompt and the AI just spits out multiple ideas all at once, like asking for a list.
Okay. A single request, multiple answers.
Right. The other was called differentiated search. This was more iterative. The human gives a prompt, the AI gives an idea, and the human instructs the AI to provide a different kind of idea. They guide the AI step by step, asking it to explore different facets of the problem space.
So independent search is like ordering off a menu. And differentiated search is more like having a back-and-forth conversation with the chef to refine the dish.
That's a good analogy, yeah. And when human evaluators rated the ideas generated by these different methods, the human crowd, the independent search AI collab, and the differentiated search AI collab, the results were really interesting.
What did they find? Did the AI win on novelty?
Actually, no. Overall, the human AI solutions, when lumped together, were rated as less novel than the ideas generated solely by the human crowd.
Oh, okay. So humans are still more original.
In this specific setup, for pure novelty, yes. But AAT, and this is a really big but, the human AI solutions scored higher on things like strategic viability, environmental value, financial value, and overall quality.
So maybe less wildly novel, but more practical, more valuable, more well-rounded.
Exactly. The AI collaboration seemed to temper the novelty slightly, but boosted the practicality and overall quality significantly compared to the human-only crowd.
That's a super important trade-off to understand. What about the difference between the two AI methods, independent versus differentiated search?
This is maybe the most crucial finding from that study. The differentiated search, that iterative, human-guided approach, produced human AI solutions that were rated as more novel than the solutions from the less guided independent search.
Really? So the back-and-forth guidance actually pushed the novelty back up a bit?
It did. And not only that, the differentiated search ideas also showed higher strategic viability and overall quality compared to the independent search one.
No. Okay, so actively guiding the AI, telling it what kind of different idea you want next, pushing it iteratively, that seems to be the sweet spot. It nudges the AI towards slightly more novelty while also maintaining or even improving the practical value and quality.
Yes. It really underscores the importance of the human in the loop, actively steering the AI's exploration rather than just taking its first list of ideas. That active guidance is key to getting the most valuable outcomes.
That makes perfect sense. And of course, the study also mentioned the other benefits of AI like speed and scale, right? Generating lots of ideas quickly, potentially at lower cost than big crowdsourcing efforts.
Absolutely. Speed, scale, cost, those are definite advantages AI brings to the table for ideation.
Okay. So wrapping this all up and this deep dive into our sources, it really paints a compelling picture of prompt engineering, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's clearly not magic. It's not some instant intuitive skill you're just, born with.
No, definitely not. It seems to require learning specific techniques, specific vocabulary to really communicate effectively with these AI systems, whether you're aiming for art or for business solutions.
And that iterative process, guiding the AI, especially in that differentiated search kind of way, that seems crucial for steering the AI towards that really valuable balance between novelty and practical usefulness.
Yeah, understanding the AI's language, knowing how to guide its search seems to be where the real leverage is.
So understanding how to prompt effectively and also recognizing the different roles AI can play, not just as an idea generator, but maybe as a designer partner, a writing assistant, even an interviewer for your own thoughts. That's becoming increasingly important, isn't it?
It feels like a core skill for the future. In many fields.
Which leaves us with some pretty big questions to think about, doesn't it? If effective prompt engineering is truly a learned skill, could we see entirely new creative professions emerging? People who specialize purely in that human-AI collaborative interface.
It seems plausible. Prompt engineer is already a job title we see cropping up.
Right. And maybe more critically, as these incredibly powerful AI tools become more widespread, how do we make sure we foster an inclusive, creative landscape? How do we ensure everyone who wants to can participate meaningfully, regardless of their initial technical background or their grasp of this new AI language?
That's a huge question. Access, education, ethical guardrails, making sure this technology empowers broadly rather than creating new divides.
Definitely something to keep thinking about.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for exploring with us. If you learned something new or sparked an idea, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Got a topic you want Nova and Echo to break down next? Drop it in the comments. Until next time, keep prompting, keep building, and keep doing it with AI.